Hey everybody, Tamara Tamu here, bringing you another episode of Unleashed Alchemy. So, this is day two of our self gratitude odyssey, our self gratitude mastery. Okay, so yesterday for day one, I just want to do a recap. We spent time in really it was a meditation to just or not just, but to recognize our bodies, our physical bodies, being in touch with our bodies. Now, day two, we're going to cover that again. We're going to take it a step further. Now, one thing I did not mention on day one is that over these 8 days, or anytime you get into the practice of self-gratitude, it can be triggering. How? Because when you are in the practice of self-gratitude, it forces you to go within. What happens when you go within? Many things, memories start to surface, whether you want them to or not, putting you in the position to observe, not to ignore anymore, including memories that perhaps you try to suppress, even events and things that you perhaps did forget because for whatever reason. Doesn't mean that the memory was bad, or doesn't mean that the memory was unfavorable. Perhaps you forgot. Now, for the memories and experiences that you would have preferred not to endure or experience, we often push those things away as a form of survival. Okay? That can come up during self-gratitude. Okay? When you are focusing on yourself and recognizing, being more in tune with your body internally and externally, that can come up. So just be mindful of that. And I don't say that to scare you off, but just be mindful that that can come up. This is not going to be a space where you can no longer ignore anything that comes up. So that's why I said if you were here yesterday, I encouraged you to write anything, any realization, any memories that come up, to write them down. All right. So also, one of the reasons why I started this self-gratitude mastery yesterday on the 14th, March 14th, for 8 days. I did that. Remember, I said I did that for a reason. Okay. Part of it being is, some of us have. So when January 1st hit, okay, on this calendar that we all use, it probably, January 1st, 2024, it probably for many of us, I'm raising both of my hands, it did not feel like a new year at all. It didn't feel new at all. There's a reason for that. Because we are now moving into this Aries season. Okay? Side note, I am not an astrologer. However, I think part of from my perspective, much of our spirituality is very important for us to pay attention to astrology because we are of the cosmos. All right. So there's something to all of this. All right. There's something to the galaxies. So I believe it's very important for us to pay attention to it. So we're moving into this new Aries season, which technically is now the new year. So part of this self-gratitude is us celebrating our newness, celebrating our expansion. So celebrating this newness of ourself, the self beyond this, that is now going to be fully expressed so that we can live our soul aligned life. Okay? So, just to preface this day 2, I needed to say that. So now, what we need to focus on in day 2 is that self-gratitude leads to self-preservation. All right? So, when you tune into your body, you start to pay attention to how you feel. How you feel becomes important again to you. It's always been important, but we have to be reminded, because of how we've been programmed, to get it back in touch with our feelings. We get programmed to distrust our feelings, then we either become desensitized, or we drown in our feelings. Okay? So we got 2 extremes that can happen: being desensitized and drowning in feelings. Never coming to the realization and accepting our divinity and embodying the alchemist that we are, that we can find that harmony to take what we're feeling and alchemize it and use it for our good. All right? The practice of self-gratitude shows us how to find that harmony again. The practice of self-gratitude reminds us that we can trust our feelings. We can observe them. We can honor them, not ignore them. And it brings the balance of feelings and taking soul-aligned, loving, guided, and wise actions in all the aspects of our lives. One of the reasons why we've been programmed to not trust our feelings is because we've heard that you can't trust feelings. Feelings are not logical. You can't operate out of feelings. Well, when you have harmony and you're not desensitized on one end and you're not drowning, when you have that harmony of your divinity and your alchemy, you can then use your feelings and use that and infuse that to know which action, inspired action, to take. Okay? So, when we develop the practice of getting in tune with our bodies, we naturally start, the natural progression is to go within. So yesterday, we literally looked at our hands, we looked at our limbs, we put our hand on our chest, we felt our chest, our breath, okay, we felt our heartbeat. We were in tune with that. So the natural progression is to continue to go within, understanding how we feel tells us what our thoughts are. It tells us what we're thinking. Going internally brings about that self-celebration that leads to self-preservation. Okay? Now, this leads us to, when we're going internally, this is what I was talking about at the top of the video, how this can be triggering, because when we're now going internally, it's like lights, sparks are going off inside of our bodies. It's awakening our cells. It's awakening our DNA, because now our energy is focused on that. So that internal switch that we have now turned on, it can spark forgotten memories. It can spark affinity towards certain things. I'll give you an example of that. It can spark your perspectives that you have lived by. And it can spark a question of, okay, are these perspectives, first of all, are they mine or are they programmed? And do they still work for me? Do they still align with my soul? Do they still align, or those perspectives align with this version of me that is now wanting to be expressed? Do they align with my magic? Do they align with my calling? Do they align with the purposes that I still have to live out? Now, I'm going to go back to when I said that internal light can spark your affinity towards certain things. So, for example, I'll use spirituality. So, I've talked about this before, and I'll get into this more in another episode, but I grew up in a cult, a religious cult. Doesn't matter the religion. But in that, when I grew up in that, I always had an affinity toward wanting to know more about Kemet, our ancient indigenous practices, magic, tarot, metaphysics. I always had an affinity toward that. But because of the cult that I grew up in, you would never voice that out loud. Because why? Because you would probably be condemned to hell, fire, and brimstone in the hottest place. Okay? So when this practice came to me, okay, during probably one of the toughest times of my life, which I'll talk about in another video, when I started to go within, I started to remember my affinity toward that. And I started researching. I started to allow information to come to me. I started to tap into that. All right? So that's what will happen when you go within. And you can apply that. I'm applying that to spirituality, but you can apply that to whatever. Okay? If, for example, perhaps all your life you have had this idea where, you wanted to live in a nice home in a certain city or in a certain climate, but even through all of that and having that perspective, you always had in the back of your mind, well, what if I don't necessarily have just one place that I live? I have an affinity toward being a global citizen where I am mobile, where I travel. I'm here at a certain place 3 months out the year, 3 months here, 3 months there. You have an affinity toward that. So just to give you an example, that's what I mean. Now that you've gone internally, you are in tune with your body, okay? The connection sparks up forgotten memories. So now look at the memory that's coming up. What is your body telling you about those memories? Pay attention to how your body feels. Do you feel discomfort? Is your body restricting? Or does your body feel rejuvenated and energized from your memory of whatever experience that it is? Hold whatever the memory is, hold it there. Okay? So, as you're holding the experience, imagine that you're holding this experience and this memory in a box. You have it in a container. So while you hold this memory, while you hold this experience, extract the wisdom from it. Think about it like this. Have you ever been, in a conversation, or maybe you were just sitting by yourself and you started to think of all these things that you have experienced. And then all of a sudden you say, wow, I learned a lot from that. Or I learned a lot from being in that situation. Good or not so good. Think about a time when you said that, when you said it to yourself or said it to someone else. When we have this practice of self-gratitude, when we're going within, it helps us to remember the experience and remember the wisdom that we gain from it so that we can start to extract it That is alchemy. When we, with self-gratitude, we begin to view those memories in celebration of the wisdom that we gained from it. Suddenly you become aware that you are in a state of observing, which is also wisdom in itself. You're reminded of your strength, your resilience. Also, you start to realize that your wisdom that you gained from that experience was not just for that experience. You've carried that wisdom throughout your entire life. So now what happens? Now you say, oh, my wisdom now, it has transcended time. It has transcended age. Your wisdom reveals the stock that you possess, that you perhaps have taken for granted. But after this 8 days of self-gratitude, you won't take it for granted again. You also start to realize that this wisdom that you have extracted and have carried with you has become your medicine that you no longer take for granted. Medicine that you can use for yourself, medicine that you can use to help other people. But let's just focus on you right now. So, like I said earlier, for example, you may find yourself saying, wow, I learned a lot through that. I learned a lot about myself through that. We often say that, and we hear others quote the same thing, but then we just leave it at that. We don't take the moment to celebrate those experiences. We don't take the moment to celebrate our own wisdom it's in our body. We don't take the time to celebrate our own medicine. In a self-gratitude practice, we find that those experiences bring us alchemical elevation. Okay? So, I want you to hold on to that. Hold on to that memory. Don't push it away. Pay attention to how your body is really feeling. And extract the wisdom. If you need help doing that, call on your own spirit. Call on your own soul. Invoke your own soul. Call on your elevated guides and your elevated ancestors to help you extract that wisdom. Perhaps there will be tears. Tears are our inherent way of turning water into wine. I talk about this in the Unleashed Alchemy Mystery School. Okay? Let them flow. That, right, there's wisdom right there in your tears. There's magic in your tears. It's so far beyond just crying. All right. So that is day 2. All right. Thank you for joining me. If you have any questions about day 2, please let me know in the comments or send me an email, unleashedalchemy@gmail.com. And until next time, cheers.